A melody of death. He was not a boy many stood around. He was an apprentice detective, who had already solved a few murder cases. Salem didn't understand why, fully, it was creepy to others. He just saved them all from a murderer, yet they find him scary as hell. He didn't understand this at all. She was a musician everyone loved to hear. A pianist with a voice of an angel. Kat had such talent that even as a little girl, adults would listen to her songs. Salem came to her show once, but not like why everyone else did. He was there to find a person who called about a brother being murdered. A female. He couldn't find her amongst the crowd, even when the show was done. Kat looked down from the stage and gasped, "It's you. The detective. You're here for my brother's case, correct?" Her words were hopeful and her voice cheery, yet still sad. Salem nodded and said with his solemn voice, "So it was you? You're the girl whose brother has been murdered?" Kat nodded. "I know. It's silly of me to call right before a show. I apologize greatly." Salem shook his head. "Work before worries, I suppose. Unless you're sick, of course." The boy suddenly went pink. He knew his jokes were terrible, so why did he say anything? Yet Kat laughed. Her laugh reminded him of a bird's song, and Salem felt calmed. Kat's sad grin stayed and she said, "I'm Kat, and you're Salem, correct?" Salem nodded silently, moving his black hat to the side a bit. Kat nodded. "Well, I'll take you to the scene of the crime." Her blonde hair shimmered at the top from musical note hairpins she had, and her pink vest with sparkles shimmered as well. Salem stared after her and then rushed forward, thinking of how plain he was, with a black hat, black hair, and black clothes. She stopped after walking to a house, and sighed, "This is his house, Salem." Salem looked around. "May I go inside to check the body?" She nodded sadly, and Salem opened the door. The place he entered was chill. The murder scene had happened on a wall. A body of a teenage boy with slits and scars all over him and a knife sticking out of him. No doubt this was a knife kill. "Would you tell me of anyone you knew to be on the scene?" "Yes, his girlfriend, Lindsay, and his best friend, Marco." What his name?" "Your brother. Liam." Salem tilted his head. "Could you call Marco and Lindsay for interrogation?" Kat nodded and took out her phone, calling the numbers. After about 20 minutes, a tan boy with black hair, a white t-shirt, and black pants walked in, followed by a girl with red hair and all dark red clothes. Salem took Marco to the side and asked him what had happened last night. Marco tilted his head and began telling the story. "Liam invited me over to meet his girlfriend and to hang out. So that's what we were doing. I went upstairs to go find the bathroom because Lindsay was using the one downstairs. I came down after about 3 minutes to Liam yelling. The steps are pretty long, so it takes about 4 minutes to get down. When I do, I see Lindsay covering her mouth with horror, and then lifting her hands to look up at me. Her red lipstick is smudged from that and is all over her hands. Anything else you'd like to know?" Salem shook his head. "But please stay here." Salem questioned Lindsay and the story was the same, Marco being invited, her going to the bathroom, her walking out a bit later, hearing yelling, and her covering her mouth getting lipstick all over her hands. Salem sighed, then shook his head. "It wasn't lipstick, was it? It was just a cover-up because you had red lipstick on." Lindsay suddenly looked nervous instead of calm. "I don't know what you mean, mister. Save it for the court, please." Salem picked up the phone and called the police, who came as soon as possible, as Lindsay tried to run away. Salem called for Kat, who came as quickly as a melody could travel, and stood in front of Lindsay. The cops arrive soon, ask for the other suspect as well. They take Marco, but Salem can tell it's just for precaution. Perhaps he was wrong, but it wasn't his place to say. He wasn't a true detective yet, so maybe he failed. Maybe His thoughts were interrupted by Kat hugging him, wrapping him in a warm embrace. "Thank you, Salem." "Why, you're welcome," Salem said, going red in the face. A beautiful and nice girl was hugging him. He tried to take that thought away, but he realized it was probably impossible to shake that feeling. "It's unlikely she'll like you back, especially since you just met," was the only thing he told himself during this moment. That is, until she kissed him. His world suddenly turned warm. His world became happy. He wasn't sure if this was really love. But he decided if it wasn't, he'd find out soon enough.